when things aren't going well on a film set, sometimes you want to borrow a phrase from Shakespeare and yell out, "Splud." It means God's blood. Now, Addy never quite yelled that exact word at me. However, sometimes when you're on a film set, there are other phrases that come up too. Here's another one. "Horrible villain, or I'll spurn thine eyes like balls before me, on hair thy head." She never quite said that in this film, Punch Me In, that I happen to be in, that she did recently with me in Boston. But I will tell you, in Boston back in 2010, I shared the stage with Addie Doyle, and we did the scene from Antony and Cleopatra, and she yelled those very things at me while pretending to choke me for theatrical purposes. We reunited last December, and now she's submitting Punch Me in the film festivals. We talk all about that and her illustrious career as a filmmaker, film producer, and actress in Los Angeles. It's coming up on Open Loops. I consider it an affront to my family that you haven't heard about Anchor. It's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain, okay? Let me just lay this out for you. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. And get this, okay? Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money, moolah, from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Open loops. Open loops. Open loops. Open loops. Open loops. You must listen to the open loops, a theme park for absurd beliefs and systems of integration between the mind and the creative spirit. Open loops.
It all started in Boston with this guest today. Now, we're not in Boston right now. You're not in Boston right now, for sure. I mean, you, who I'm talking to, you're looking for some intellectual stimulation. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. You're looking for a head trip. You're looking for a brain warp. You're looking for the matrix to be shattered. Do not worry. You're still in the right place. This is Open Loops, a theme park for your intellect and your imagination. And you are going to go on a trip all the way to Los Angeles today. We have Addie Doyle on the show. I'm very good friends with Addie. She is a fantastically talented actress. She's a great filmmaker, writer, producer, director, and I had the distinct honor in being a film star for once, a little bit. A supporting role in her short film Punch Me In, about the local recording artist scene in Boston, Massachusetts. It's a tribute film. You're going to learn all about it. You're also going to learn about what happens on a film set when Addy can't be in the moment. That's right. She spills some actor secrets on you. You'll also learn in this episode, and this is very key, what is the difference between typecasting and essence? This, to me, is one of the most interesting distinctions I've ever heard, because they tell you a lot about, in acting school, they tell you a lot about type. What's your type? For a while, I was telling people I'm a Chinese restaurant, relatable, intellectual. Nebbish, too. That was the other word. Nebbish. Yeah, what was it? Chinese restaurant, intellectual, nebbish, relatable. Those were my words. But it turns out it can be even simpler. What if I were to tell you all human beings operate on a spectrum between two specific words. We're going to get into all of that. It was a thrilling discussion. Now, if you enjoy this sort of discussion, please do subscribe, rate, and review Open Loops on Apple Podcast and iTunes. For now, though, Addie Doyle brings it, and I was so honored to be in her film. Check it out. She's coming right up. Lights, camera, podcast. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have actress, filmmaker, gold digger. We're going to get into what that means. Addie Doyle is on the Open Loops podcast. Addie, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me, Greg. This is amazing.
Yes, so to give some context to everybody, Addie and I met each other at the Commonwealth Shakespeare. We were the first class to be in the Commonwealth Shakespeare Apprentice program. When was it? Like 2009, I think? I think it was 2009, summer 2009.
Summer 2010.
To 2010. Wow.
Yeah. I graduated high school 2009. I was going into I just finished my freshman year at NYU.
Yeah.
And this was the summer program that I applied to in between freshman and sophomore year.
Yes. And you know what? I don't know if you experienced this, but I definitely felt that, I mean, in general, I think we both just like connected as people, but it was also like I was this New York person going to this program, and everybody was like in Emerson, or they were in the BC program. There was a girl in the Tufts theater program. Like it was a very New England based, some Brandeis students, very New England based group of kids. And I kind of was like, oh God, like I'm this NYU person, like trying to get into the Boston theater scene a little bit here. And then you were like, I met you and you were like, hey, I'm at NYU. I went to Strasbourg. And I was like, oh, wow. I feel like that was like a key moment for us.
Yeah.
And we really connected.
We did. We fought a little bit about Strasbourg versus Adler because at NYU, at NYU, we're like sorted into houses like Harry Potter and at Hogwarts. And we were in sort of opposing school. I mean, that's complete bullshit because it's actually the same thing. They all stem from Stanislavski, but we had some interesting debates, which I loved.
Yes, you were one of those kids that like loved talking about acting theory as you were learning it.
So much. I'm such like a theory. Yeah, I love acting theory so much. And I could just talk about it all the time. I think it's really fun. It's just that it's not like, I don't know if it now applies to my current life, but it's fun to talk about and like debate about. But I think that's just because you're in school. And I think that now that I'm, I'm 10 years older.
Yeah.
And, I've had professional experience now, it doesn't matter. Everything is really valuable and important. And I think back then I was like, no, I'm on the right side. And that's
yes. Well, actually, you know what? Here's what I'm curious about. And we're going to talk about the main reason I definitely had you on today, because you were like, Greg, we're about to submit this film that you were in to some festivals. And I definitely want to talk to you about that. But you know what? Just like, let's talk about your acting life for a second. You've been in Los Angeles for, how many years now?
I've lived here for 6 years.
6 years. So you've been out and you've done, you've been on regular national television, like shows on ABC. You've done web series. You've been in short films, feature films. When you're on a set, how often does a teacher's voice from Strasbourg enter your head? Like, how technical does it get to that level of technique from school at all?
That's a great question. I think the big thing that repeats in my head if I'm having a moment of insecurity, like I'm not really sure if I'm doing the right thing or I'm making the right choice or I'm understanding the writer properly. I think that it really just comes down to, I had a teacher named Robert Ellerman who's still there and still teaching. He was also a disciple of Bobby Lewis, who was also from the group theater.
Yes.
Yeah, so he's like a direct descendant of not biologically, but he worked with him very intensely. And he just said, all this, it's the only question you need to ask yourself is, can I believe this? Can I believe this? And I think it's just getting to that point where you just are so, you have this map of what you're doing, but then at the same time, you have to like let go within that map. That the mapping out is so that you're honoring the writer's vision, the direct vision, the producer's vision, and also like the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And then just kind of marrying that with also like living in the moment and having those like deep moments of connection, which don't happen all the time on stage or on film. But when they do, you're like, oh, this is why I do this. Like you're just so energized and you're like, I see that person. Like I see them.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways for me was like, can I believe this?
Yeah.
So that'll repeat sometimes in my head.
That's very cool. And what I also just really think is interesting is, you know, I read an interview with you where you were talking about like wanting to be a triple threat growing up. The idea of being like an actor, singer, dancer. You know, there was one time that I was in like a bookstore I think it was in Cape Cod, and these old guys were these old men were in the movie section. I was just browsing the movie section, and these old like film buffs were like talking, and they looked at me and they engaged me in a conversation. They were like, do you know Judy Garland used to perform in film, but then at night she would go out to these concert halls and still perform for a crowd. Even when she wasn't doing films, she would still do it. She had it. These young actors today, they don't do any of that stuff. I find it so interesting that, like, I think you still need to do theater, Addie. Like, you can't just do film. Like, you always find a way to do theater somehow. Like, do you feel like that's just, and you're like a theater nerd and lover, like, is that just an essential part of everything you do? Like, how does it factor in when LA is so film and TV based?
Yeah. And I've done some theater here, and I've produced a little bit of theater out here as well. Yeah, I mean, I think it is, you know, and I've debated about, I mean, I like debates. So I've debated about this too. They are different and similar at the same time, because, you know, if you really can do a full show from start to finish and do the rehearsal process and live in that space and really like, again, going back to that, like believe for 2.5 hours, you know, it makes transitioning to film a lot easier. However, there's a lot on film you cannot get away with that you can get away with in theater. And I think that that's something that some people like fight about, like want to say like, oh, film's so easy. And I don't agree with that. Like there's so much like, in film auditions, to me, like you just cannot get away with certain stuff. Like they just see right through. I mean, like with a camera this close, like you can't lie. No lies, no room for lies. So it's tougher that way, because you have to be so in the zone. Because in theater, what's nice about it is that there's distance. No one can touch you. Like as soon as it's like, you know, curtain up and the music starts playing, if you're in a musical or whatever, play, like nobody's going to interrupt your process. They can't, maybe somebody backstage, but like really you can hide or whatever.
Yeah.
On a film set, you don't have that luxury as an actor usually. There's so much going on around you. And there's sometimes 200 people doing very important things around you, moving incredibly expensive and heavy objects. So you have to like really concentrate. It's just a different level of endurance. It's a longer day. As a film actor, it can be 2 hours. It can be 16 to 18. So that's a level of endurance that's different. And then with traditional theater, it's 8 shows a week. And that's a very different level of endurance, because you know, you're in this rhythm. So I have respect for both, because they're both very, very different, there's an exhaustion and an endurance that's different for both. I don't know if that even answer your question, but you crave both.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, you're a gold digger, right? Like, I think someone that is like future oriented. And we talked about this last year when you came to New York, because you had a short film that was premiering as part of a festival. And, we were talking about sort of like the way...
You came to Chelsea. I think it was Chelsea Film Festival, right? That's
Yeah, I think
yeah.
so. Yeah. And I was like, Addie, what are you like? What gets you up every day? Like, how are you? Like, what is even like? Are you trying to audition every day? Is the focus like focusing on acting? Is the focus on doing film now? Like, how do you kind of wrap your mindset around this work? And your answer was, Greg, I just take on creative projects. I follow my creativity and then have a project based around that.
I think that I learned I'm sure that you can relate to this as well, coming out of NYU, that, you assume that because, Tisch is it's a fancy drama school. And you come out and you think that like that's going to mean something. And it does, kind of. It doesn't necessarily always help you get a job or get an agent or anything.
What is the street cred on Tisch out there? Like, I have no idea. I haven't been out there like to audition. Like, if people know that you went to Tisch, like what are some of the common reactions in Los Angeles? Do people care at all?
I think actors. I don't know. I never really got reactions from like agents or managers. Over it, but I did from fellow actors. There's definitely respect. And I think also from like filmmaker, like from other people who are like I think like directors or people who it's never really been on like the casting or agent manager side that I've kind of heard like, oh, wow. Or it's people who are not in the business at all and are like, oh, you went to Tisch. And that always feels good because I think when I moved out here, I was like, well, I guess it didn't really matter that I went to this fancy drama school for 4 years. But I think more than anything, it's the community. Like I moved out here and I literally had been to LA once for a week. And I was like, I'm moving. And I knew 11 people when I got here and they were all NYU people. So there's that. And I immediately had a network. So
back to what you were saying about like, you go to Tisch. It's a fancy drama school, and they don't really. It was tough, when we were there. At least when we had our overlapping period, you're 2 years younger than me. The lady in charge of the program, Liz Bradley, was trying, and to a lot of people's dismay, honestly, trying to bring business into it. But the bottom line is that, when you go to a school like this, like they really do not depict it.
Because I thought that Liz took out the showcase. She came from Carnegie Mellon, and I thought she took out the showcase, and that's what I thought really like stunted.
Really,
the people, and I think it's back now. Don't quote me on that, but. I thought it was back, but the showcase, which is like as a senior, there was one showcase for like all studios and you had to audition for it, but they couldn't guarantee that as a Tisch graduate that you got to audition for agents and managers, which I think is a colossal failure of Tisch for everybody who graduated from there, that there's no kind of Stone Street kind of does that. And there's some sort of general showcase, but I thought Liz was the reason that no longer existed, even though I took a business class with her though. I took the business of the business of art or something.
Interesting.
But
I don't know like what decisions, like to me that maybe that was like a specific decision that she made that she thought didn't fit in. But I do know that at least the teachers at Stella Adler were communicating that it seemed like this new head of Tisch was much more. I mean, there was talk about like requiring everybody to go to Stone Street at one point, which honestly really wish I'd done. Just because
Stone Street was the film acting studio.
Yes, Stone Street was, and when I did the elective, it was the film and TV acting studio. Is like as when you go to Tisch, your first 2 years are required to be in your primary training studio, and Stone Street is like an advanced one. So once you get to your junior or senior year, some people once they spend like the last 2 semesters or the 4 semesters at Stone Street if they want. But if you're looking to break into the biz, like that is the one where you're actually meeting agents and casting directors. You went there. I mean, did you feel like you got like some sort of business insight that you wouldn't have otherwise?
Yeah, I thought it was helpful to audition for agents and managers. You know, I thought that was a great exercise. And I did think, you know, I have a teacher from Stone Street that I'm still actually, like, I would consider him like a mentor friend at this point. He's moved out to LA and is a filmmaker, and I learned a lot from him. And also, just, like, he's a really great director, and just his way of like working with actors and kind of learning how to work cameras. And we got to work cameras, which I think is incredibly valuable. I think that learning also like what goes on behind the camera and learning how to direct is really important. That makes you a way better actor because you just get it. Like, you just don't take shit personally. And you're just like, oh, like now I understand like why this is the way that it is. So I feel like I did learn, I felt like I learned good acting stuff, like reading copy for like a commercial audition. We did some voiceover work too. There were some really good teachers that I really liked that came in and out of Stone Street, but I felt like I learned the most about the business when I moved to Los Angeles and I started taking class at Leslie Kahn.
Oh.
And where I met my still acting coach and like basically made most of my best friends out here in LA who I'm still very close to. And I did that like the second month that I was in LA. And that's really where I was like, oh my God, I didn't even learn this in school. Like I didn't even, it was just very, I think because of the solid acting foundation I had, it was really helpful. And I'm very grateful for that. It just was like, this is an advanced course about the business and about marketing yourself and about branding that like we really didn't touch on.
Wow. I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but I am kind of curious, like broad strokes, Addie, what are some types of things that you experienced from these advanced classes that like you really didn't get at all in New York City?
I think the biggest thing, to everyone's surprise when they think about LA stereotypes, is I actually felt they really taught me you are not in competition with anybody else. You are just in competition with yourself. You might look like another girl, but guess what? Nobody's going to do it like you because you have your own essence. I learned about essence more than I learned about type, and you know that I can't do everything. I should not play every role. That's a thing. That was another thing because I think in school it's kind of like do everything, but you know, you're stretching, so that's fine. But realistically, I should not play every role, and I need to know my essence and love that essence because it's not just a type. Like a type is a box. This is how they describe it. There's a box. You're in that box. Look at every actor that you admire. They did that for a while, and then they got out of that box, and now they're in another box, and then so it's not a permanent thing, but your essence is permanent.
Wow. This is like kind of mind blowing to me. Like, what is your essence? I mean, if we're going to look at like big name actors, I guess I would say like, Leo DiCaprio being like the biggest name actor I can think of. Like, do you have words you could put to his essence?
I think a good example that was given to me that I can just tell you like right off.
Yeah. Tell me off the top of your head. I'm curious.
Because I then from Leslie Kahn, I then took another class with Sam Christensen. May he rest in peace. He died last year, but he taught this master class on, I think it was like an 8-week master class on literally your essence, just like getting to your essence.
Yeah.
And it was probably the most valuable class I've ever taken because not only was it, anyway, so we talked about this and he talks about this very, very specifically. He said that you work on basically on a spectrum of basically like 2 words, and that's all you will play for the rest of your life. And it is actually something that affects you in your day-to-day life. So he's like, look at Keanu Reeves. His spectrum or his polarity is lucky and unlucky. So that's all, those are the only characters he plays. And that is also what haunts him in his real life. He's either really, really lucky or really, really unlucky. He's had incredible tragedy in his personal life, but also incredible luck. And and he plays Neo, the one. He played, in The Matrix. And and in John Wick, he loses his dog, and he, but he's the special, he gets very unlucky in that movie. So he only operates on a spectrum of lucky and unlucky.
Oh my gosh.
So that's essence.
That's amazing. This is like so
it's not a type, it's an essence. So he, based on his physical appearance, but your physical appearance can change and always is changing. But his essence, he will play that until he decides to stop acting.
Oh my gosh, 8 weeks on this?
Well, it takes a while to get to it.
So this is so interesting. I don't want you to, I know this, we're going to talk about this film, I promise, but I'm like really drawn into this discussion now because I've never heard this in the world of like.
This is all Sam Christensen. I cannot take credit for this, but yeah, I mean, ask me anything you want. I mean, was
it mind blowing for you? Like when you discovered yours?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because because you can ask people about your type. You're like, how would you describe me?
Yeah.
And those are not really getting to like, what do people see behind your eyes when you come on camera or when you're on stage? Because they're going to see brown hair. They're going to see I'm 5'4". They're going to see whatever. But there's a spectrum that I'm operating on, which is basically his words were, I'm operating on a spectrum of discernment. So it's either that I'm hyper focused and know exactly what to do, or I'm just completely not interested.
Wow. Oh my gosh. That is so good. That is so good.
That's and you could say like wise and naive too. That's another way that I looked at, because I was like, I don't even know what discernment means. But,
totally.
But
yes, that goes back to you wanting to have discussions about like acting theory and us and that Shakespeare thing. Like our conversations were about like who here in Boston is really doing like what we both feel was like the real work based on some ideals we had about like what acting was supposed to be. Like we were always doing that. But at the same time, Addie, like I can also feel, I see another reality for you where like you got out of school and all you were doing was like Pretty Little Liars kind of stuff. Like I see the world where you could have just been in high school things and like your type was like kind of like a sassy like high school girl. And I'm like, this girl kind of got around this and like stepped into something more powerful. And now that I know that like you took this,
I would have taken the Pretty Little Liars job.
right. But this is like a different frame.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wonder, I feel like this essence thing is like really something that also in general, like people should learn about for themselves too, beyond acting.
Yeah. And Sam used to coach business people. I mean, he coached a lot of different kinds of people, but he did focus on actors. And it's technically like a branding course.
Yeah.
But what you get to, and he's actually very spiritual too. Like he was kind of this, he would talk about Freud and he would talk about, who was Freud's, the guy?
Carl Jung.
Yes. He actually talked about him more because it was this whole thing. Oh my God.
The archetypes.
Yeah. And then he talked about Joseph Campbell.
Yes.
Which made me read The Hero with a Thousand Faces and
totally.
And that just like blew my mind that we're all telling the same story.
Yes.
So that was like, he was really like a guru. Like he was like an enlightened being, that man. He not only was like helping struggling actors, he was also like teaching them history, psychology. Like he was just
wow. These are the type of people I love, and the type of people that like, even this podcast hopefully is a tribute to, because I love like brains like that just kind of like help other people's brains that help you expand.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But look, I mean, you are so the reason I've had you on is because you've just had like kind of a run recently of producing, writing, directing, and acting in short films. And the one that I had the pleasure, I was so honored, Addy. I was like, when you reached out to me, I was like, what? She still thinks I can like work with this? She's out in LA doing all this stuff. Like, how am I being considered for this? It was for a piece called, it didn't even have a name at the time, or maybe it did, I don't know. But Punch Me In is the name of this film. Takes place in sort of small town
Framingham?
off of
Framingham?
Boston. Yeah, I mean, it's in Framingham, but I don't know how to describe Framingham.
Right.
Because your brother actually he works at a music recording studio in Framingham, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And he is in the DJ scene. He is in the music production scene.
Mhm.
And you and your family, you know, you grew up in Beacon Hill. You're a Boston gal through and through from growing up there and stuff like that. You wanted to do a tribute to that. But I also know there's another story to why you really wanted to do a film as a tribute. So why don't you talk a little bit about Punch Me In and the origin and how it fit into like sort of your family's timeline as well?
Yeah. Well, I just Brendan came home with Brendan's my brother, and Brendan's a music producer and a writer, and he started working at Red 13 Studios in Framingham, Massachusetts when he graduated from college in 2013, I believe. No, 2017. I graduated in 2013.
Okay.
In 2017, and he just was coming home with all these incredible stories of all the people that he was meeting at this studio and how much he was learning. And he met his now producing partner, who I also live with. We all live together in LA now. And I just was like, this is just too good. Like, these stories of these people are just like incredible. And there's so many more. Like, I would love to do a feature of this. I mean, I actually think it'd be better as a TV show, but
yeah,
this story of this, but I wanted to be in it, and I wanted to direct it. And I also wanted to write it. And I just wanted to play something that I really hadn't played probably in a really long time, which is kind of this like sassy, egotistical lady who is this very green music producer. She's talented, but she is like, you know, she's in Framingham, Massachusetts. She doesn't have a lot of real professional experience of dealing with difficult situations or just making it not all about you.
Right.
And so that was the concept. And, you know, so my brother was definitely the inspiration and his producing partner. And then, you know, as we were developing the script, the other actor that I really wanted to play, and it's also like loosely based on clients that my brother has worked with, very loosely. And and so, but then we got Damian Washington attached, who is not only he's a fantastic actor, and I know him from LA. He's also a rapper, and I was like, all right, perfect. Like,
yes,
exactly who I need. But he also is this huge multiple sclerosis advocate in the YouTube space and on social media. And I just was like, hey, if you're comfortable with it, like, I think this could be a really interesting dynamic for the characters to kind of be dealing with throughout the script, and that, you know, he's not comfortable telling her this at first or what he's going through. And she kind of takes things too personally, and sort of that struggle with, you know, Maeve, the character that I play, that she kind of misinterprets and sort of, she kind of blows it at first with him, and sort of how she works to kind of get him. He's a big client, so how she works to get him back.
Yeah. I love, you know, I got to play I guess your brother's boss, in the sense, the really the owner of the studio. And I love how like collaborative the film is, because even the girl who played that character, Megan.
Yeah, she's my co-director.
Yeah.
And she was like mainly the on-set director, because I was in every scene. So that was a little tricky, but I did most of, like, you know, I did some heavy lifting on the pre-production end, and she did a lot of the heavy lifting during production. And then together we've been very collaborative in the post-production phase. So it's worked out really well, and she was so awesome. But yeah, I mean, that was a really exciting thing to have Megan be a part. She's a friend of mine, Con, which was something I mentioned earlier. And so she's been a great collaborator this, you know, whole time. And she's she's so funny in this. She's so funny in this.
Yeah.
And she was just a really great energy, because I'm just so glad that she was there and agreed to co-direct, because I could not have done it without her.
Yeah. Do you like working in like that kind of collaborative environment?
Of course. Yeah. I think that what I'm learning, I think the hardest part is just finding the right collaborators, is finding the people that you jive with and finding the people that like, you know, you get each other. So, and I think because I've really been filmmaking or, you know, that was my third short that I had done. I'm about to do my fourth next week.
Oh, wow.
And and you learn something new each time, and it gets better and better. I love collaboration. It does come with compromise, and it does get emotional. You're tired, so emotions step in, and
Yeah.
you know, I didn't sleep that much that whole week. So, and that's part of the fun, but it's really the hardest. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, to be perfectly honest, is making a movie. It might be just 12 minutes, but it's the hardest 12 minutes of my life.
Wow. I didn't
So
realize
hard.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about the idea that this was, and I don't know if this, like, I don't think it spoils anything, that this was filmed in Framingham, Massachusetts and Boston. Like, I know that was significant for you. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I wanted to shoot something in Boston because my family was moving. I lived in Boston for 28 years, and we moved out of Boston in January of 2020.
Wow.
So it was kind of a last hurrah, which is my first short film.
Yeah.
Promo. Yeah, it was really important to me to shoot something in Boston before I left. And so that was really special too. Thank you for reminding me of that.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a key thing. I mean, that's why you also are like Greg. You were like, we met in Boston. Like, I want to make this
full circle.
I want it to be very local. I want it to feel local. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that it has its own, you know, we are actually probably one of my favorite scenes in the film is the outdoor shot that actually ended up coming out super great. But it's so Boston. Like, you walk outside and you're like, this is not New York. This is not Chicago. Like, it's a very Boston feeling. So that's special because, you know, Boston will always have a warm and fuzzy place in my heart.
Yeah, no, I'm honored I got to be a part of that tribute. Where do you think this fits into your trajectory of like Last Hurrah, which, you know, was a very, I mean, it had really hilarious moments, but like very dark. I mean, yeah. And then the ceremony, which is like also seems to be kind of like a little more, I don't know. Yeah. Like, what is, and then this is, it almost feels like it's a different, complete, they're very different genres.
Totally
you're
different.
Operating in. What is your interest in that? Like, how are you moving through these different types of films?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the ceremony, which will be available to watch in October on various festival platforms. We're going to be at LA Short Fest online on October 7th, and at another festival that I haven't announced yet, but there's another festival in October
and
too.
there was a big announcement for the ceremony that just came out, right? What was that?
We got into an Oscar qualifying short film festival called LA.
Oh my gosh, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, so that was our second film that I co-wrote with Lee Hurst, who I did Last Hurrah with. And then on the set of Last Hurrah, we came up with the ceremony. And ceremony is very different, very stylized, not a ton of dialogue. It's very visual. It's a horror thriller. And it's based on, if you've been watching The Vow on HBO, which is a docu-series.
Oh my gosh, I was just talking about this with someone. It is so fascinating, Addy.
Yeah, so it's based on NXIVM and ESP, which is the cults. Yeah. And DOS, the eventual like female sex cults.
Yes. Hey, master. Hey, girl. Yeah. Oh, God.
Yeah. So it's
so messed up.
It's loosely based on that, or we took a lot of inspiration from it. But it's really like a weird horror daydream. I don't think it's like that scary. It's more like a thriller. There's blood. But there's some really beautiful shots, some really cool effects, and it's very short. It's like 6 minutes and 50 seconds. Very proud of that. And and then I did Punch Me In, which, you know, I think was just something that I was like, you know, I'm back in Boston. I was collaborating with Will Gregg, who was the editor and was also the assistant director. And
I love the team, though. Everybody on that crew was fantastic. Like all those bosses, you know, there were some college kids who were helping out, and it was awesome. Like you got a good crew together, or Will assembled, like, knew some good people too. Like you guys
Will did. So I was home, and I knew I was going to be home for a while because we were moving and the holidays, and I was going to help my family pack up the house. And I was like, you know what, I should shoot something while I'm home. And so teamed up with Will, and he connected me with a bunch of people. And then I brought Megan in, and you and Damien. So it just all ended up like magically working out. And, you know, I knew I had to write it because it was like a very personal kind of family story, you know, and it's also, so it is different. I'm collaborating with Lee Hurst again on this next one, which it's not a horror movie at all this time. But it's a dark comedy. And I think and I think it's just following that inspiration. I do lean towards comedy and that sort of witty banter. And I do love a good mystery. I do love a surprise.
Yeah, we're both fans of Lost, the greatest show of all time. One of the greatest shows of all time.
I do. Yes. You know,
Lost
and people
is so good.
People still hate on that show. And I'm just like, I actually loved the ending. Well, we've definitely talked about this, but
I know you liked it more than I did, but I will say that, like, just overall as an experience, I grade it as like one of the top 5 most important pieces of art to ever enter my life.
Yes.
Absolutely. It has influenced everything I do. It is like J.J. Abrams. I don't know if you've ever seen that TED Talk he did about the mystery box. Like he was a kid. How all of his work is based on, like, because he used to be into magic, and like the magic store in New York City had they had a Tannen's mystery box, which was like the magic store. You didn't know what was going to be inside this box, whether it was pranks, magic trick, like maybe a book or something. And like he tries to bring a mystery box into every single film or TV project he does. And to me, that is so juicy, Addy, because Lost gave you that episode after episode. I think you play with that too in your work.
Yeah, no, I want some mystery. I want some comedy. I don't mind a little blood. I don't love gore. So I'm not interested in gore becoming like, you know, I mean, there's certain things I'm not interested in, but I love a good kind of twist. I love a twist and I love humor. So I think that's where the dark comedy thing comes in. And even in Punch Me In, there's a twist. So, or there's just more of a surprise review.
Yes.
And so, and I love that. So, you know, I think my like, you know, Lost is definitely my favorite show. I mean, I'm super influenced by like The West Wing. So that like really fast writing.
Yes, for sure. I see that in your work.
Even though it's not like a political thing, but that's one of my favorite shows of all time. And then like The Office, which I think is a perfect show. So those are, and like Gilmore Girls, which has that witty.
Yes, totally.
Brilliant.
Totally.
And Veronica Mars, I think well, we don't have to talk about the 4th season, but on Hulu, but that's like a dark mystery comedy. That's just like, oh, so good. So I love that kind of, and I would love to do one of my favorite movies is the movie Clue.
Oh yeah.
Which is like a perfect movie.
Yes.
I think it's just perfect.
I love that. I love it. The alternate endings, so good.
And it's right, because it's so exciting. You're never bored. It doesn't hold you captive. You're like, I'm only here for an hour and a half. You're giving me alternative endings? Like, this is fantastic. It's like, you know, it's how I felt like watching The Hangover for the first time, where I was like, this is the most exciting thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yes.
I have no idea what's going to happen. And I love that feeling in a theater. And so I think in some way I'm trying to figure out how to do that. And it never really happens where you're like, what is gonna happen?
Yes.
So
That's why theater frustrates me sometimes, especially the work I saw in college, like they told me was great acting, because it was like, I'm so much more entertained by watching Kiefer Sutherland as Jack Bauer on 24 than I am at this beautifully acted Chekhov piece. Like, it killed me sometimes. But then I had good teachers that like would work on scenes, and they'd do a little like sometimes the scene work became more interesting than like an entire show of those scenes.
I agree with that. I think that's incredibly valid, that sometimes just a 10-minute scene can be the most interesting thing. And you don't need anything more. You're like, that was like an I mean, like it feels like it holds as much information as an encyclopedia in a 10-minute Chekhov scene that's done well in class.
Yes.
Over 4 hours.
Do you think you're still I mean, this interview that Voyage LA did with you, you talk about stuff that I just hadn't heard you say before, about sort of how your production company, North Node, specializes in stories told from a feminine perspective and the exploration of self-centeredness and selfishness. This really intrigued me, because you told me once, you were like, Greg, I don't think LA is as superficial as people say it is. And then I have other people that are like, oh my gosh, it's the most superficial thing ever. Tell me this, what is your relationship to superficiality in Los Angeles? And then I want to delve into how your work explores more of self-centeredness.
Yeah. So I think I got really lucky when I came out here, because I had my NYU friends who were very down to earth, if not just a little like, I think the worst thing about NYU kids is that they're like a little snobby about their taste.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like everybody's just like, it could have been done a little bit more like this. Like,
yes,
that
totally.
I literally just embodied somebody that I actually know.
Totally.
So that's probably the worst thing about NYU kids. But other than that, and then I joined Leslie Kahn, where I met this huge group of people who, and you can't go through Leslie Kahn unless you're a really hard worker, because you would just leave immediately. They kind of would weed you out, because it's like you do this intensive and it's literally the most intense 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I just met a group of really hardworking people who were also very business oriented, but also very talented. And I just feel like I got very lucky in terms of I don't have any superficial friends, and I don't really, and anytime I smell or feel that like there is nothing that turns me off more than people trying to compete with me or trying to one up me, like I will be so out of there so fast. Yeah. And sometimes that happens at parties or with people that I don't really know. But I just know, like, I'm so not interested in, I mean, maybe some people like pursue those kinds of people, and maybe I would be further. I don't believe that.
So what you mean is that when you say that, like, it's not that much, it's not that the culture isn't, or that there isn't like a huge piece of it that is, it's that you were able to find a community of people that weren't. And if you want to escape it, like, keep looking, because they are actually out there.
Yeah. And I think that in any place you're going to find, I mean, I believe in, it's yin and yang. So you're going to have a lot of people that are great and a lot of people who really aren't great. And that's just the way that it is. And so just try to find more of the great people that you get along with. And it's okay to have a tight circle.
Yeah.
I just think in terms of, and a lot of it's, and especially because now I'm in more of this, like I'm reaching out to people and trying to collaborate with, I'm extending my network of filmmakers, of, sound and lighting and, directors of photography. So in that sense, it's, being mindful in those first couple conversations with them. But I don't even run into it there. It's just about finding people that, you feel like want to make art, like, you have similar ambitions and you like their work. And I think just focusing on the work, I think it's really easy to find people who just aren't doing any work. Yeah.
And that gets to, what you were kind of saying earlier. No, I'm sure we went off a tangent from that about like the work, like being,
just find busy people. That's the thing. I think in LA, it's really easy to get distracted because there's the beach and there's hiking and it's pretty.
Yeah, right.
But it's just, if you just attach yourself at the hip to people who are busy, and you'll stay in a good
And doing
headspace.
creative things that inspire you. I mean, or like invested in those kind of things.
Yeah. And I think, in terms of that, like selfishness that you were talking about, when I was quoted in that article, I think I think this past year has made me think about selfishness in terms of like activism. And I think that was more, and I think there is kind of that undertone as well. I mean, I'm talking about multiple themes now in all of my films, which just sounds ridiculous, but
right.
But like there is a conversation there, especially in the ceremony, but about narcissism that I'm very interested in terms of like what narcissism is and how it affects the world. So there's that as well. And sure, that's in LA too, but I don't know. I'm interested in like talking about it more.
Yeah. Self-centeredness and selfishness. Yeah, I think it's well, I mean, I think the biggest thing that has come out of this pandemic is kind of like the big question of like, well, if we can't go out and we can't do all these like high-end exclusive like fire festival level things that with our lives, like, then what are we doing all the work for? And just because like a lot of people's lifestyles shut down and they were faced with themselves. I've been talking to this a lot with other people, and I've been really wondering about actors and filmmakers, and just like how this time has forced them to confront their own day-to-day existence in terms of like, what am I doing this for?
So honestly, this is the first year, and I think that was the scariest. When everything shut down, I was really sad. And I mean, everybody was. I just was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know when everything will go back to normal. It doesn't feel like it's ever going to go back to normal. And like, why am I doing this? It was sort of the first. I've had many like identity, career crises. That's not true. They've been big. But
right. We all do, especially artists. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But this one felt like, I don't know what I'm doing this for. Like and especially in June when the Black Lives Matter protests were happening, and I was participating in them, and just so much activism was just literally everything I was focusing on. It just was like, what? Why am I so absorbed in like do, perform? And it was, for the first time, I was like, all I really want to do is like put up a sheet in my backyard and like put on Midsummer's Night Dream.
Wow. Did you?
I haven't yet. I have this film to do, but then after, I think I will.
Yeah, let us know about that. We'll promote that too.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Like perform, like accomplish, and like have something to like brag about, and like make X amount of money, and like all this. It just all came crashing down, I think, in June, because I was just like, there is so much more important stuff going on in the world. We are screwed. And I just felt like, I don't know. It just was like, I'm not being helpful enough.
Yeah. Do you think this film, Punch Me In, could do anything to help the world? Probably not.
Well,
it'll take people away for a little bit. It'll take
it's certainly fun. I mean, it does. I think it touches on women in the workspace, but it also sort of spins that on its head too. And I think there's a multiple sclerosis undertone to this. I think Damien does like such a beautiful job with that. So
yeah.
So do you. So no, it's not. I don't think it's out. I do think what it's talking about in terms of in general with the selfishness that we are in this cycle of is, how we just take things so personally, and we think everything's about us. And like, if somebody says something to you, you're like, they're an asshole, I'm going to get defensive, like this whole defensiveness thing.
Yes.
And that's definitely what the movie explores, where it's like, you know what, why don't you just be a professional and realize like, you can't get defensive like that.
Yeah, yeah. No, it is I think it is a great lesson. It's a lesson that, I mean, your brother said was really real that Maeve is going through. Like, that is something that, he's personally dealt with, like having his own ego, like, be checked as somebody that, because you get to start, you feel like you start knowing stuff in that battle between self mastery and knowledge of your craft and the space for you to realize that maybe you don't know everything is a constant tug of war that definitely for some people take it like really hard. Like they think they know everything and then they get, smacked with truth. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, I need to quit completely. And I feel like this movie is a great lesson in being like, here's how you gracefully handle admitting that you might not be a big deal yet.
And that you're
okay.
wrong, that you're 100% wrong. I think it's so hard for us to admit that we're wrong because for whatever reason, when we were growing up, if we're wrong, we're bad. And if we're bad,
yes,
well, then I can't be a bad person. That's also happening in this film. But I just think it's very interesting to see when people are wrong, how they're just like, well, I didn't mean it that way. I didn't mean it that way. Instead of just being like, oh, okay, I see. I see what you're saying. Okay, I totally understand. And then moving on. I don't know why that's so hard for people. I really don't. And sometimes it's hard for me because you're like, I don't want to be like, I want to be tough and I want to be strong. But it's also like, why do I have these like swords up all the time? Or we all do, I guess. It's just
shame related to parents, probably. Like I mean, if there's anything I've learned in my studies of like fringe hypnosis and psychology, like probably something between ages 3 to 7 where your parents shamed you and but it's still it's so hard. I mean, I deal with it all the time of like having to, I mean, even when a director gives you notes on a film or on a stage, sometimes like I have to do that. Like, why didn't they like my choice first? Okay, wait a minute. They see something I didn't. They're right. Boom. Like, it's fair. It's
right. And getting yourself into that place of, it's humbling. It's just being humble. And it's also, I want to stress, like as a director too, I think what Maeve went through literally in this film is also what I was going through behind the camera. Like, this was my biggest directorial moment. I was also in it and I was producing, it was a lot. And I was definitely struggling with all of that too, those feelings of like, trying not to take things personally and trying to like not let certain people's energy, that's all part of the creative process. And it's just, like you said, a lot of people will take that criticism where somebody's like, and I didn't like the way blah, 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 or like somebody looking at you a weird way or whatever it is, or someone just criticizing you, giving you a bad review, and they'll quit.
Yeah.
And they'll just be like, or they'll, never work with that person again or say mean things about them. And, I just hope that we can, and I'm not perfect in this, but I just want to get to a point where, that's not really what's happening anymore. Like the whole taking things so personally. And
I think what you said about people being more humble, or not being humble, being okay with like experiencing humility. Like if that was a practice, if people could actively practice that, like, that would be huge.
Yeah. And that's what, to me, because filmmaking is so many moving parts, it is so humbling because as much as I am prepared, so next week I'm shooting a short film called High Horse. As much as I'm prepared for that right this very moment, I know I'm going to mess something up. And that's humility. Like just going and being like, I know I'm going to drop the ball somehow in some way, even though, because that is the nature of creativity. Like creation's nothing is perfect about it. And something will inevitably go wrong, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Doesn't mean you suck. Doesn't mean you're a failure. It's just lessons, learning, growing, and it's hard.
Yes, yes. Well, look, I definitely I experienced humility on the set of Punch Me In. Certainly when it came to like how to hold a cigarette on camera. That was
You
it's
did
like
such a good job, though. It's all in there. It all made it in the film.
oh my gosh. I'm
Mhm.
so excited to see look, I mean, when is the earliest the public
The
is going to be
public.
able to see Punch Me In? What's happening with it right now? You can speak about because
Oh,
I know you're submitting it for festivals and stuff.
yeah, we're finishing up color and sound as we speak. They're actually doing a VRX effect today.
Oh, awesome.
And I should be reviewing that tonight. They're sending me that. So by next week we're done. We just have to cut a trailer next week. I'm also on set next week, so that's probably not going to happen. So I think it will be done and submitted in 2 weeks, and then the public can see it in 2021.
Yeah.
You might get an exclusive preview because you're cast.
Yes, I'm so excited. I'm so excited for this. Addie Doyle of the gold digging, acting, filmmaking fame, theaddiedoyle.com is where you can check out all her work. We're definitely gonna in the show notes link to all your social media. And yeah, absolutely. Like, I definitely love everything you're doing, and I'm excited to see, what you do next, what your body of work is gonna be.
Yeah, I think again, I think it goes back to that, just following the creative spark and what interests you and being humble.
Yes, yes. Thank you for making me humble tonight. And again, on your film set, Addie Doyle.
You're awesome. You were awesome.
Addie Doyle, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Oh my. What do you think my essence words are? I've been really sitting with this. I love Keanu Reeves, right? Lucky and unlucky. Addy, discernment, disinterest. Greg, neurotic and less neurotic. But we'll figure it out. Actually, you know what? Here's what I'll ask you. If you know what my spectrum of words is, feel free. Send me an email, Greg, that's Greg, at open-loops.com. That's Greg at open-loops.com. Curious what you think it is. And for yourselves, I mean, what do you think your spectrum words are? It certainly sounds like a useful tool. I was so happy that Addy blew my mind in that way. We always had mind-blowing conversations about acting. And, actors talking about acting is kind of boring unless you're in it. Kind of like doing improv. Oh, that's a controversial statement. I'll get into that some other episode. Addie Doyle, though, she is a delightful person, and I love that she's kind of got that Kubrick thing, or Kubrick, as they say. Liquid Kubrick brings in the Shakespeare and the proper pronunciation all in one go. Doing a different style of short film every time. Love that dedication. Love that she's into the darkness. Love that she's into the twist. Open Loops. This is a theme park. We're all about the twist. We're all about the upside down. If my life could constantly be like hey, let's hear the twist, like living life, and then here's a complete twist, I think I would enjoy getting up every day even more. That's what I do this podcast for, so that I could share all the things that are blowing my mind with you. You want some more mind-blowing stuff? This October, get ready. We have some fairies. We have an interview with an interdimensional alien coming up. You're definitely going to love it. And you're also going to love Punch Me In when it comes out. I'll keep you posted on it. Know my essence? I know you do. Greg at open-loops.com. Please help me. I love all of you. And I'm talking to you, I love you the most. All right, take care, everybody.